Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history of Wadsworth for posterity. I'm Cesar Carino, your host, and our guest today is a very, very well-known former teacher in Wadsworth, retired now, Faye Holvey. Now, Faye, you've been in Wadsworth every minute of your life, have you not?
Yes, I was born in Wadsworth and I've never left.
Now, are you sensitive about your age?
No.
No. Tell us when you were born and where.
I was born on June 5th, 1927 in Wadsworth, Ohio, probably in the old hospital.
In the old hospital. Mm-hmm. Where were your parents living at the time of your birth?
They were living in Wadsworth.
But what street?
Main Street.
Where on Main?
They lived in a little cement block house down not far from the Seville Road. Okay.
And on the east side of the road or west side?
On the west side of the road.
West side of the road. Is the house still there?
Yes.
Okay. And what are your memories of that neighborhood?
Of that neighborhood, they were close neighbors. They were caring people. As I was growing up, it was back in the time of the Depression when people didn't have a lot. But in this tiny little cement block house, my relatives, sometimes neighbors, would get in there and they would sing and they would bring musical instruments and they played euchre and they played rook and they managed to have a
wonderful
really good time.
That's right. Who were some of the neighbors, Faye?
Some of the neighbors across the street would have been Charlie and Emma Morris.
Right. Mm-hmm. How about to the north and the south of you?
Well, later as I was growing up, there was Fred Randall and Luther Miller.
Fred Randall did what in Wadsworth?
Well, he was Frank Randall's father,
right.
And I guess both of those folks were Wadsworth engineers.
Engineers, they were in charge of streets and things of that nature. And what about some of the other neighbors? Any kids you played with at that time who would still be around, or even if they aren't around?
When I did find somebody to play with as kids, I went down the street a ways, a block or two.
And where'd you go?
I went towards town. I went down to Berge Street and farther down on Main Street.
And who were some of the kids you played with down there, Faye?
On Berge Street, I found Don Brentlinger.
Don Brentlinger.
And his sister Jeremy.
Mm-hmm.
And
Don and Jeremy's mother was Elva Brentlinger.
Yes.
Elva Hartman Brentlinger Baldwin, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Donna's dead.
Yes, and I don't know about Jeremy.
Jeremy, I think, lives in Pennsylvania.
No.
And they lived on the north side of Berge Street.
Yes, there was another street on the corner there.
I think it was Hartman's Court or something like that.
I don't remember the name of that other little connecting street
her
between
father lived there,
Burgering
too.
and Baldwin's.
Elva's father lived there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And with whom else did you play?
Oh, Blair Kassenheiser lived up there.
Kassenheiser.
And a Leota Martis.
Leota Martis. I haven't heard of that name for a long time.
There were Collins kids up there.
Barb, and
I think she had a sister, Vanessa.
Right.
And there was a brother.
I've been trying to get Barb on the program. She and Don Fraley are married, and I'd like to get both of them on. Because Don's family is a huge family, and was the Kales. His mother's family are the Kales. And Barb Collins, well, she knows everyone, and everyone knows her. But as you probably know, it's very difficult to get people to come onto the program. They're a little bit embarrassed and so forth. So it takes sometimes months, and in a couple of cases, it's taken over a year. But if you see Barb, tell her that you'd like to have her come on the program so we can hear the history of the Collins family. Now then, as you reflect upon...
Wait a minute, the Foreman kids were on Berge Street too. Jim and Lowell and...
Jim, John, and Joe. There were 3 boys. Foremans, right?
All right, the other Groover was Lowell.
Groover,
then.
so Lowell Groover.
Lowell,
Now, they were cousins, you know, to the Brittlingers.
Yeah.
Mrs. Groover was a Hartman, and the Brittlingers' mother, Elva, was a Hartman as well.
Yes.
So they were all cousins, Lowell Groover, and they're still around too, and I'd like to get them on the program.
And somebody else who was on that street was Esther May Weldy. She married.
Yes, Esther Weldy.
Didn't she marry Max Groover?
I believe she did.
I believe she did.
Esther Weldy would be a good one to get on the program too. They have a lot of history there. Berkey Street was a thriving community. It was not only a street, it was a community at that time. As you reflect upon your growing up days, well, before that, maybe you can tell us, were you the oldest in the family?
In my family, there was a brother born to my mom and dad, but he didn't survive.
He didn't survive. Those things happened very frequently in those days. 1927, June 5th, you were born. And at that time, you were the only living child, right? Going farther down the road on date lines here, who was next in line in your family?
In my family was my sister Doris, who was born 3 years later.
She was born in 1930, the latter part of 1930?
In August 16th, 1930.
August 16th, 1930, my father's birthday.
Oh.
Well, he was born 1930, however. He was born many years before that, 37 years before that, as a matter of fact. Doris, and then were there other sisters as well, or brothers?
No.
That was it, just the 2 of you. So we had Faye and Doris, and we're going to talk about Doris in a few minutes. I went to school with Doris, know her very well, graduated with her, a very talented woman. Before we do that, let's go back to see who your parents were. They're probably gone now, I'm sure, are they not?
They both are.
Both are gone. And where they came from and when they came to Wadsworth.
Well, my dad lived on the property where I'm living now, where I live with my husband. Had 4 generations of my family who've lived there.
Okay, now give us a geographical description of where you live. Now, it's on State Street, but that may be a completely different street 50 years from now or 100 years from now.
Well, State Street's that funny street that has more than one name. By the time it gets down to Treese Road, it becomes the Rittman Road.
Rittman Road, and you live on Rittman Road. That's why we have to do it geographically. So we are now at the intersection of Route 90 or 94, is it not now?
Well, it's County Road 233.
County Road 233, and you're going southwest toward Rittman, and you have now crossed the Ville Road, and let's take it from there. You're about, a mile or so south of that, are you not?
I don't hardly think it's that far. Maybe it's a half a mile south.
Half mile?
Of the
Okay.
Seville Road.
And then on which side of the road?
It's on the west side.
West side of the road, and it was a farm, a big farm at one time.
It was a big farm.
And now it's not a big farm anymore, is it?
Not anymore, because the farm is now State Highway 57 and the airport and some Wadsworth service stuff.
Are down there. Now, your father was born there. His father was born there.
Yes.
And his father's father was born there, or came to live there, right?
Came to live there.
Came to live there. So your father was born what year? 1890 what?
Dad was 64 when he died in 1960.
So 1896 then?
Sounds good.
1896. His father was born when, approximately?
I
That's
don't
it.
know. That might be in this obit.
Good. Let's get it in the obit. That'd be wonderful. Not there?
No.
But he probably was born 25 to 30 years prior to that, wasn't he?
Well, my grandfather was married on January 1st, 1887.
Your grandfather was married.
Yes.
So let's say he's 25 years old at 28 years old at that time, or whatever. So he's born in the late 60s, 70s, somewhere in that area.
Yeah, probably.
So your family, the Kreiders, have been here that long. Now, the hard question, Faye, how are they related to all of the other Kreiders in town, in the area?
Well, in my dad's family, my grandfather's family, brothers married sisters. My grandfather's brother married my grandmother's sister.
And who was your grandmother?
My grandmother was Ella Flora Roan.
R-O-H-N?
R-O-H-N. Her parents were Daniel and Mary Leatherman Roan. And she was born on November 19th, 1863. So
1863.
That would get close to my grandfather's age,
Probably
too.
in the early 60s then. I was
Yeah.
thinking late 60s, early 70s, but probably early 60s. So they have been here at least 140 years.
Oh, yeah.
Your family has been here a long, long time. You kind of own Wadsworth, don't you?
Well, not exactly. I mean, some of the kinds of growth and like that of Wadsworth, I think my family did just keep steadily plugging and working along and do what they were supposed to do, but to own it? No.
Well, that's just a figure of speech, obviously.
Uh-huh.
But what about the other Kreider relatives? Now, we have tons of Kreiders in Wadsworth.
Okay, so in this marriage of this brother and sister in my grandfather's generation, Dana Kreider and my father were first cousins.
So the Dana Kreiders are part of your family.
Dana's mother, Clara, was my dad's aunt. And so was Dana's father, my dad's uncle.
So they crisscrossed there.
Yeah.
In other words, Dana's father and mother were brothers and or sisters to your grandparents.
Yeah.
So Dana then is your first cousin once removed.
Yes.
We had Dana on the program. He's 91 years old now, and he still works.
I know.
Still works.
After one of these storm things or something or other, we see that dear old guy out there digging stuff out of the ditch.
Oh, yes. He's very, very active and still sings a great deal. As a matter of fact, I heard him sing. His wife, Ellen, was directing the choir, and he was singing. And hard to believe that a man 91 can even get up and walk, but he not only walks, but he can sprint, and he sings.
Well, whatever he does, he's doing it right. He had singing brothers, I understand, that used to sing together.
Now, I knew one of his brothers, Willard,
and there was Leonard and Ralph.
Okay, I didn't realize that those were the two brothers, but Ralph and Leonard I knew too. But I thought they were cousins, but you say they're brothers of Dana's, right?
Not strictly sure there.
Okay, we'll find out as soon as this is aired. Let me tell you, I'll get some phone calls, and it probably will not be from Dana, but it'll probably be from some of the other people. We have some people in Wadsworth who are absolutely excellent on these relationships, and I'm so pleased that they call because, as you know, this is not a finished product. What this is, we're just gathering data for the person who writes, or persons who write the history of Wadsworth for the year 2014. They'll begin writing probably next year. It takes a good 10 years to write, 10, 12 years to write a good history, and that's what they're going to be doing.
That'd be interesting.
Now, you started school, having lived down there, you probably started school where?
Oh, you mean when I went to school?
Elementary.
I went to, I came up to Central School for kindergarten with Lucille Wells. And then after kindergarten, I went to Franklin School for 6 years.
6 years. You went to Franklin School because you were right inside the city limits. Just a stone's throw south of you, you would have been in the township.
Actually, it wasn't very far below the Seville Road where that corporation sign was then.
That's right. You could throw a stone. At a young age, you could throw a stone. At my age, at your age right now, you couldn't throw a stone across the table. But at that time, we could have thrown a stone that distance. Do you remember some of the new people that you met there? You had neighbors with whom you played, the Brittingers and Jeremy and Don, and then Barb Collins and so forth. When you went to Franklin, you met new friends. Who were some of the new friends you met?
Well, friends I met. Well, I met kids from Park Street and East Street.
And who were some of those kids?
Bill Evans, Leo Doyle,
Bud Doyle.
George Capitan,
George Capitan, right?
Helen Dispenza,
Helen. She had a brother, Joe.
yes. I was trying to think of who was that nice guy that, oh, Johnny Mack was on.
John Mack?
Yeah.
I had him on
on
the program twice. Well, once, I'm sorry.
On Pine Street.
Pine Street, right. John Mack. Well, I had Frank Mack, I'm not John. I had Frank Mack, his brother, on the program. Do you remember anything that was exciting? Was anything happening down there near the school at the time that you were in school? Did you remember, for instance, there was a murder down there at one time. Did you remember anything about that? Probably pretty well shielded from it.
No.
You know, a shooting, I don't know if it was a murder, it was a shooting. Now, from there you went to the junior high school, and there you met other people from all over Wadsworth.
Well, and at the time by the time I did get to 7th and 8th grade at Central School, I did meet people who came from what's Isham School, was this Wadsworth Centralized School?
From the 9th grade.
Yeah.
And who were some of these new people that you met?
Oh, Dwayne Kreider.
Dwayne Kreider, president of the bank, now retired.
And Faye Ebert.
Faye Ebert. Well,
And,
Faye was Faye Stuver.
Yes.
Her maiden name was Stuver.
And Gwen Few.
Gwendolyn Few, who married
Jean Everhard.
Jean Everhard, now dead. Jean is dead.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Jean is dead.
Oh, I didn't that. Because she was in my high school class, and from time to time I hear of those people. And Marjorie Thomas,
Right.
and Janice Connect, and Rosemary Madigan, and Merle Cartwright, and well, I did know from the Wadsworth Band, my husband's cousin, Margaret Razor.
Margaret Razor. You mentioned the Wadsworth Band. Who was the director during the time that you were there?
Mr. Bennett.
E.K. Bennett.
Yeah.
What did you play?
I played in the percussion.
Percussion.
And there was more than one drum head that we had to use when they didn't use the other instruments if the weather was bad, and there was more than one of those calfskin drum heads that did break when it was raining or something.
When you were in the band, where was the band practice room at the high school, the old high school, which is now Central Middle School?
Probably in the auditorium. In the O.J.
It wasn't below where the swimming pool used to be?
I don't know.
Possibly so. Now, what kinds of things did you do in the band in those days? I mean, your uniform looked like what, and what did you do? We didn't have competitions in those days.
No, I think that most of our, what we did do was local with football games and things like that, and our uniforms were the Wadsworth colors, red and white, and just red and white uniforms.
And would you march down to the field or anything like that on a Friday night for a football game? How did you get to the field?
Oh, I guess we did go on a bus or we did meet there. I don't really remember.
Don't remember that. Now, went all the way through high school. Do you have any particular teachers who were significant in your life in the high school?
I liked Helen Stone.
And what does Helen Stone teach?
English.
Right. One of the few people...
Helen Stone, that doesn't sound right for her first name, but Miss Stone.
Miss Stone.
Yeah.
But we didn't call people by first names in those days,
No.
ever. We called them by their title and their last names.
Well, that was respectful and that was nice.
It was very nice. As a matter of fact, I object to people, particularly very, very young people, teenagers, who see you for the first time and call you by your first name. That just seems to me like an invasion of, or not an invasion, but it's a a step away from teaching respect to young people. Now, did you meet anybody special in high school that might have been well, shall we say, a lifelong companion?
Well, I tell you, my dad's first cousin, Norman Boyer, had these two daughters, Jean and Janet Boyer. And my mom and dad were lifelong friends of Norman and Louise. And
Norman and Louise live right next to where Overlook School is right now.
Yes.
On Broad Street, just on the opposite side, on the north side of the road, almost in line with Durling Drive. Right. And Norm Boyer had a gas station in the south end of town, Blue Sunoco station in the south end of town.
On the corner of Water Street and Main Street.
Right. Norm Boyer. And Janet and Louise, I'm sorry, not Janet and
Jane.
Jane was a nurse.
Jane was a nurse.
Right.
She was a Navy nurse, actually.
Nurse.
I think she even got married in Japan.
A Navy nurse, and Janet was a
Teacher.
Very attractive girl. We went to school with her, as you would know. Your sister and I went to school with Janet. So they were first cousins, right? Or
Our
first
fathers
cousins.
were first cousins.
So they're first cousins once removed.
Yeah.
Right. Now, did you meet anybody else who became lifelong friends in the high school?
Well, I hear from time to time from my high school classmates, but not really close.
Not that very close, no. Left high school, graduated what,
1945.
1945, with Brother Henry Carino.
Yes.
Right. Now dead.
Yeah.
And he went to the service. Incidentally, I must correct something. The other day I was on the air and I said that he went to service on June 7th, 1944. It was June 7th, 1945, so that has to be corrected. So in 1945, you graduated on June 1st.
That was the date?
That was the date, because on June 7th, he went to the service. 7 days. Didn't have time to even so much as take his gown off almost, and he went to the service. He graduated on a Monday or something like that, and I forgot what day he graduated, maybe a Sunday, I'm not positive. But anyway, on the 7th, he went to the service. Now, you didn't go to the service, always. What did you do after you graduated from high school?
After I graduated from high school, I did work for a year at the B&W.
Doing what?
Oh, it was office work. It was some typing and filing and...
You took typing in high school, did you?
I thought in high school that what I was going to follow would have been office work, stenography and typing and that kind of thing.
Who was your teacher? Ann Williams?
Yes.
Dear soul. A dear, dear soul. And you didn't follow that very long, so what did you do after you worked at the B&W for a year? Oh, incidentally, with whom did you work at the B&W? Anybody from Wadsworth?
I did ride for my daily ride to get there with a Mr. Nelson for a while. Was his name George? Anyway, there is a son, George.
George Nelson. They one time lived on the corner of Maple and Lyman.
Yeah.
And they had Jerome Nelson was another brother, and then they had a sister who was a very brilliant girl.
Marilyn?
Marilyn Nelson, right. That's right. So you rode with Mr. Nelson. They moved from there then. They went out to the Sadie Razor Farm. Now, the Sadie Razor Farm has a history all of its own. No longer there. It's on Wall Road. Geographically, approximately a mile and a half south of Wadsworth and a little bit east of the, well, maybe 3/4 of a mile east of Route 548 or South Main Street, whichever you want to call that at this point. And they lived out there for a while then, too. The house still stands there on the corner of, or at least it did. Maybe it doesn't anymore. Maybe
I really don't think it's there
No,
anymore.
it's not anymore. It's part of a parking lot or something like that from the church. But that was the Nelson residence. And Mr. Nelson drove you into town, is that correct? Or into
Over to
Wadsworth?
Barberton.
Did you stay there for a year? Then what did you do?
And then I got myself over to Kent State University in the College of Education, where I thought I was going to secondary education in this business stuff. But after a while there and some observation that you do in classes and that, you know, I got into the elementary, and I liked what I saw and what the kids were doing and that, so I did change my major to elementary
Education. You graduated from Kent then in what, 1949?
1950.
1950. What did you do then?
Oh, in 1950, I looked up Mr. Burkholder and said, could I have a job? And at that time, there were lots of openings, and it wasn't hard to get a foot in the door, and I just got started at Lincoln School.
And you were there for how many years?
At Lincoln School?
Well, altogether in Wadsworth schools.
All together in the Wadsworth schools, 44 and a half years.
44 and a half years. Wow. That's a long time. Tell us a little bit about that history. And we're not going to forget it. Well, as a matter of fact, we'll come back to that in a second. We're liable to either run out of time or forget this. Tell us about your sister, her husband, where they are, what she does, and then tell us about your own personal family, and give all the names of your children and your grandchildren, because if you don't, you'll get shot.
Okay, well, while I was going to Kent, I met my husband, who was a GI student there, and we got married on July 23rd, 1949.
1949. Who is your husband?
My husband is George Holvey.
And where did George live?
George lived in Wadsworth too. He lived on Pine Street in Wadsworth.
Pine Street. In other words, you were. What I was trying to get from you a little while ago is that you probably would have known him from Wadsworth, but you went to Kent and knew him. Huh?
I didn't know him at all until I needed a way home from Kent on weekends, and I met him over there, and we got together from meeting at Kent.
Now, George is a little older. I mean, George, your husband. Can't think of his first name.
George.
George. Well, yeah, that was right the first time. George is a little older than you, but not too much, right?
No, he's 5 years older.
Five.
Than
That's
I.
not too much. That's just a little bit. But to a young kid, you don't know that. You know, if they were within a few years, but 5 years is quite a bit, so he may not have known him. George was majoring in what at the time?
He was in the business college.
Mm-hmm. You got married in 1949 before you graduated. Mm-hmm. And where did you live?
We lived in Wadsworth, and where is our now home. We commuted.
Both of you commuted?
Yeah.
Right. And while we're there, what happened then? Did we have some children?
We have Sarah, who was born in 1952.
1952. And what is Sarah doing now?
Sarah is a musician with the Mandan Bismarck Symphony Orchestra in North Dakota.
Plays what?
She plays bassoon.
Bassoon. The double reed instrument, which is very difficult to get. That is, players, not. And she plays in the symphony. Mm-hmm. Is that her life?
Well, that is her, what she has been interested in for a long time. She did marry this Texan she met in 1979, and they have 7-year-old twins.
7-year-old twins. Their names are?
Aaron and Dylan.
Aaron and Dylan. And where do they live now?
They live in Mandan, North Dakota.
Mandan, North Dakota.
Mandan.
Mandan, North Dakota.
That's an interesting Indian tribe, what their homes are like and those lodges are like that they...
And she lives up there with them?
Yes.
And what does her husband do?
Frank? Well, Frank has had some different kinds of jobs. He's always been interested in cooking, and the last job we heard he was working in was in a bakery.
Bakery, wow. I wouldn't want Frank as my neighbor because he might make me eat some of those things that I certainly would not want to eat, like good cream puffs and things like that. I don't need those. I guess none of us does, but I certainly don't need them. Now, Frank's last name is what?
Boyd.
B-O-Y-D. So Sarah is now Sarah Boyd.
Yes.
Right, and she plays in the symphony, and you have two. She's the only daughter.
Yes.
And the only child.
Yes.
And only 2 grandchildren.
Yeah.
And they're twins.
Sarah waited until she was 40, and then she said that she was going to have her family all at once.
And she did.
She did.
That's pretty good planning if you can do that. Now, that takes care of marriage, takes care of George, except that what did George do, and where did George work during his lifetime before he was retired?
George has been in auto refinishing.
And where?
At our home.
At your home.
That was
when you
my
talk about auto
grandfather's
refinishing,
farm.
tell us a little bit about that. I mean, probably 50 years from now, everything will be plastic and you just replace it. You don't refinish it. What does he do?
Well, he has restored some antique cars, and he had more lately later model painting and cars, some repair work.
And beautiful work that he does, too. He's well known for that. Going then to your sister, Doris. Tell us about when Doris was born. Well, you told us when she was born, but tell us a little bit about her growing up years, and where she is now, what she is doing, and so forth.
Well, my sister and I did do some kind of traditional female stuff. I became a teacher, and my sister became a nurse. She did her training at St. Luke's in Cleveland, and she met Don.
Don what?
Simpson.
Simpson.
Don Simpson. And he did get degree in English, I think, at Case Western Reserve. He did his undergrad work at Mount Union, and then I think he got his master's degree at Case. And he, in his education, did get to Boulder, Colorado, and he really didn't begin teaching there. He did begin teaching at a college in Virginia, and then he did go to Boulder, Colorado, and they lived there a while. And at least one of their sons was born there. And they have 3 sons, Dale and Jeff and David. Dale is in Washington State. Jeff is in Denver, and David is in Guadalajara.
Oh, in Mexico. What does he do there?
He's a geologist. He has Salt Lake City geology company who has sent him to Mexico.
Guadalajara. And is she practicing now, or is she practicing nurse, or is she now retired as well?
She's now retired, but she did some public service nursing.
Her instrument was what? Musical instrument.
She didn't.
She played the piano.
She played the piano.
Very well, too. Very well.
Well, we both did that. I mean, we had this nice little English piano teacher. He was Herb Rada.
Herb Rada.
Yeah, he lived on...
Frances Rada was his wife.
Yes. Tom
Rada. Big man, smoked a pipe went kind of like this. And a big man, and of course, Frances was a huge, tall woman. Beautiful, beautiful woman. She's about 6 feet tall or better.
I guess she taught home ec.
Home ec, right. Nice person. Oh, she was a sweetheart. They did not, I don't think they had any children ever.
Not that I know
And
of.
Tom Rada taught both of you to play the piano.
Their father, Herb Rada.
Oh, Herb Rada, okay.
Was the piano teacher. He would come to our house and he would ask his mother to make him a cup of tea, and she didn't know how to make English tea, and it was never just the right
Consistency.
brew.
But you played, both of you played the piano. You took piano for many years, did you not?
Actually, yes.
Like 10?
Not that many, maybe 7, 8.
7 or 8 years. I remember that Marilyn played very, very well. I mean, just surprisingly well. Now, let's talk about George's family. The Holveys are a huge, huge family in Wadsworth. To which family does he belong?
My husband's father was Sam.
Sam Holvey. And what is Sam Holvey noted for in Wadsworth? What is Sam Holvey noted for in Wadsworth? What did he do in his lifetime here?
He worked at the Ohio Match Company, as many
everyone knew
Wadsworth
him.
families did.
Pardon me? Everyone knew Sam Holvey.
I think they probably
Oh,
did.
surely, yes, everyone knew him. I mean, he has to be a good 105, 10 years old now, or maybe even more. And I knew him from way, way back.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I worked at the match shop one year, or one summer, I guess it was, or yeah, one summer, back in the late 40s. I worked in the match shop. Who are some of George's relatives here in town?
George's relatives on his mother's side were Ken Razor.
Oh, that's right. Let's find out who his mother was first, and then we'll go from there. She was
All right, his mother was Ella Messner.
Ella Messner, right? And how is Ken Razor, now dead, but how is Ken Razor related to your mother?
Ken's mother and George's mother were sisters.
They're sisters, right. Ken's mother and George's mother were sisters.
Yeah.
So George and Ken were first cousins.
First cousins.
Right. And who were some of the other Holveys? There were Holveys on Broad Street on the corner of Baird or Gordon, one of the two.
Some of those were cousins. George was an only, and he actually has more Messner cousins than close cousins in the Holvey family.
Right. Now the Messners, tell us some of the Messners.
Helen and Jean and Carol, and one of the Messner brothers, the only Messner brother, was Ernie Messner. And
We had him on the program.
oh,
And he's a first cousin of yours. I mean, not of yours, of your husband's.
he's my husband's uncle. Ernie Messner was my,
Oh, Ernie Messner. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't have Ernie. I had Ernie's son on.
his son is Lloyd.
Lloyd, I had him on the program.
Okay.
Yes. Ernie Messner had the taxi company.
Yes.
So your husband George is Ernie's
Nephew.
nephew. Okay. And who were some of the other Messners that, the other relatives, I guess?
All right. On George's dad's side was his Aunt Laura, and his Aunt Laura has Richard and Joyce and Katie.
And their name was?
Bird.
Laura Bird. And Katie Bird.
Katie Long.
Katie Long.
And Joyce Hughey.
Joyce Hughey, right. She married Dale Hughey.
Yes.
Right. Katie Long married Paul Long. I mean, Katie Bird married Paul Long.
Yeah.
And then the Bird family is a huge family, too, and I've been trying to get some of those people on BIRD. There are at least 4 Bird families around. So now, in other words, George Holvey is related to Katie Bird, or Katie Bird Long,
Yeah.
and to the Hugheys also.
Yeah.
So you're related to everybody in town.
Well, it's a network.
Surely is a network. Who are some of the other relatives?
Whose relatives?
I guess at this point you're all interrelated, but George's relatives. What about the Holveys with the lumber companies?
They're cousins somehow, but they're not close, so
Not
I
close.
really don't know the connection.
Probably don't know that connection, but they're all interrelated. Now, how long have the Holveys been in town?
About as long as,
The Kreiders?
I would say.
A long time. Now, there are no Kreider progeny to carry on your father's line. Is that right?
Well, there is this second cousin of my father's nephew.
And who would that be?
Would be Lowell Kreider on State Route 57. He is on the farm where my cousin Harold was.
So in other words, there are still some of that lineage.
Yeah, they live in Indiana and they live in
Well, we're going to run out of time unless we get to your history of Wadsworth schools. You started in 1950 at Lincoln School.
with Earl Joachim was my first principal.
Who were some of your teaching colleagues?
Lucille Wells.
She was there. She was your kindergarten teacher, and you became her colleague, right? Mm-hmm. Now, how did that feel to you?
Well, she was a sweetheart. I mean, she was just a pro. She is the stereotype of what you think a kindergarten teacher is. It's
Should
just,
be.
Yeah.
She physically, describe her physically.
Well, she was just a cheerful little round.
That's a nice way of putting it. Cheerful little round person who just always filled with joy. And tell us how she dressed.
I can't really say I recall.
Kind of the long skirtish types of things, wasn't she?
Yes.
Yeah, I can still remember that. The reason I asked how you felt about that, I had two teachers in elementary school, Audra Miller and Irene Bird Grindle. And when after I began teaching, I became a principal, and both those teachers came over to that building where I was teaching, or principal, and taught there. So I was my teacher's principals, the principal of two of my teachers, former teachers. And that was a difficult thing for a little while, but they made it so easy for me because they were, well, they're just professionals. They're both dead now, but they're professionals, wonderful, wonderful people. And incidentally, that Bird is related to Catherine Bird also.
Oh.
So they're all interrelated here. Mm-hmm. Who were some of the other colleagues that you had there?
Sally Coleman.
Sally Coleman. Tell us who Sally Coleman was.
Sally Coleman taught first grade.
She didn't stay around Wadsworth very long, though, did she?
Oh, I don't know. I remember her. I just remember her from Wadsworth. But she got sick. She had something seriously wrong with her, leukemia or something, and she got sick and she died. But I think she had a daughter, Anne, I believe.
Coleman. And who else?
Oh, and Mary Sample and Art Cartwright and Harold Fix.
Harold Fix was a teacher, an elementary teacher at that time.
Yeah.
He had been a farmer.
Fifth grade.
Pardon?
He was the fifth grade teacher at Lincoln before he did get into administration.
And then he became the superintendent.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Harold Fix as a young man. Now we had him on the program. He's now close to 80. And, well, not really. Yes, I guess he would be, wouldn't he? Close to 80?
Yes, I believe.
And he has no hair, of course. But what was he like when he first started to teach?
Oh, he was funny. At the time I was at Lincoln, Kate Thomas somehow back in there did become the kindergarten teacher, and Harold was very, very tall, and he did go into Kate Thomas's kindergarten class, and some of those little fellas had never seen anybody as tall as Harold, and they thought he was a giant.
A giant.
But he was kind of a man that was gentle and friendly and all like that, and they warmed up to him. But it's just his size.
Harold
kind
was
of
probably 6'3" or 4", something like that.
He was extremely tall.
Tall. And when he had hair, probably was even taller, wasn't he?
I guess.
Do you remember when he had hair?
Yes.
And how did it feel then as one of your colleagues? As a matter of fact, you started teaching before he did, right?
I started in 1950, and I believe he did begin after I did.
Right. How did it feel that a person who came in after you did then became your boss when he became the superintendent?
Well, because of the kind of a person he was, it didn't bother me.
Didn't bother you nor him, I'm sure.
No.
Who were some of the other colleagues there?
Art Cartwright, Maggie Razor.
Maggie Razor. Now, is Maggie related in any way to your family anywhere along the line?
The Razors in this connection are related in Wadsworth too, but don't know for sure how. She married Bill Razor.
Bill Razor, right.
He was in my high school class too.
Yes, Bill Razor. And Maggie is now retired as well, is she not?
Yes.
Well, of course, most of them are retired.
Oh, and somebody else was Orpha Huntsberger.
She taught there?
She taught at Lincoln School.
And what did she teach?
She taught second grade.
A lot of people do not know that Orpha was a teacher at one time. Of course, Orpha's now probably past 90, isn't she?
I wouldn't be surprised. Her husband, Willard, was my history teacher, and I have fond memories of him too.
Oh, everyone does. He died a few years ago, and I went to his funeral. And one of the things that the minister asked us to do was to identify anything that we remember specific about Willard. My older brothers had him in the 30s. So they said, when I finally got to the high school, I'm 10 years younger than my oldest brother, they said, now if you see Mr. Huntsberger, you can ask him any date in the world, and he'll be able to come right up with the answer right away. So I saw him. As a matter of fact, we were at Smith Dairy, and I saw him, and I said, Mr. Huntsberger, I'm Chris and Frank Carino's, oh yes, I remember them very, very well. And they said that for me to ask you any date that that I want to, and you'll come up with something significant that happened at that time. I said 1901. Oh, he said pick a date, and I said 1901. He said I was born. So that I know that he is now 98 years old, and he would be 98 years old if he were living. His father lived to be 104.
I know.
Now, you stayed at Lincoln how many years, Faye?
Well, I was at Lincoln a year and a half, and then I quit a while with my daughter's birth, and did begin at Lincoln again in 1955. And then I was there maybe until 1962, and then I did go over to Valley View.
Went to Valley View. And how long? Who was the principal of Valley View at the time?
After Earl Joachim wasn't the principal there anymore, George Meyer was.
George Meyer.
Principal.
We had him on the program as well not too long ago. Well, about a year ago now. George Meyer was the principal at Valley View, and you taught there. And what grade did you teach at Valley View?
I taught second grade at Valley View.
And did you remember any specific people that you had in second grade the first year that you were there?
Children?
Yes.
Gee. I'd like to, but I can't think to go.
Well, that's very difficult to do. With 44 years, they all kind of run together after a while. And you were at Valley View for how long, and who were some of the colleagues at Valley View?
Well, at Valley View were Helen Eckert and Jeanette Hartley, who have retired, and now they live in Venice, I think it is, Florida. And well, Mary Sample was at Valley View too.
She went everywhere, didn't she?
And Mary Rohr. And Helen, all right, that was her first name.
Oh, you'll think of it. And who else? Kathy Greckney?
Kathy Greckney.
Now, the reason I brought Kathy up, you probably remember when Kathy was born, do you not?
I don't remember the year, but well, Bill Heil was her dad. Bill
Right.
Heil was the treasurer in my school, so I kind of remember back in there when Kathy was
born. Now, how did that feel? Where you were a colleague to a girl whom you remember being born. You know, Faye, you're kind of 72, and aren't you? 72, and yet you've had so many experiences that you, became a colleague with one of your kindergarten teacher, and then you became a subordinate to one of the persons who followed you in teaching, and then you taught with a girl whom you remember being born.
And I've had more than one generation of some of the Wadsworth families. That's kind of fun.
Who are some of the people whom you've had multiple generations?
Jackie Siffert Leckie and Dean Leckie's Steve. I had Jackie at Lincoln School, and then at Valley View I had their son Steve. In the Edmonds family, I did have a Pete Edmonds, and then his children and some of his nieces and nephews. The last year I did teach, one day there did appear this young man at the door to bring Wesley's lunch, and he was Eddie Crislip, as I remember him. And
from out on Rammer Road, or Medina County Line Road?
I think so. And he said, "Oh, you were my second grade teacher," and here I had his Wesley the last year I did teach.
One of the biggest surprises that I had in teaching was one day when I was at the university, the grandchild of one of the first students I taught came to the university now. And then her daughter was married at a very early age. So by the time that the grandchild came along, this was in the late 80s, 89, 88 or 89, something like that, I had the grandchild. So I began thinking to myself, and here at that time, I had no grandchildren at all. So let's go back to the Main Street house again, just for a little while. You said that it was a little cement block house. Mm-hmm. Now, that kind of gives a depiction of a house that was probably built for some other reason. What was the house originally built for?
I don't know. I just remember there being there as a little girl, and if it was for something else, I don't know. I didn't.
Did it have a cellar?
It had a basement, but I did. Older, so move into the brick house
in College Street
on Paul Kreider Main Street, I think. And then did they live on high rise?
High rises right now. And the probably is like a red light. And so forth. What things to remember.
Much in my, but
Families, despite their frugality, just didn't have anything, and
Wow.
that was somewhat the sign of the times. Going back to your last days in school, that is the.